Hello and welcome to the Preserving History and Democracy podcast. My name is Caroline Zamora. I'm the Chief Deputy County Clerk. I just want to say welcome. This is our third episode of Season 3. We're very excited that Season 3 is underway. You're going to be hearing a lot about elections as we come into the general election season. Also, you're going to be hearing a lot of things, a lot of fun things from our recording and filing department like today. But before I introduce and we start talking about today's topic, I want to go ahead and turn it over to Bern. How's it going today, Bern?
It's going great. I am so excited because we have a very special guest today. Her name is Teddie Moreno, and she is the library specialist at NMSU's Library Archives and Special Collections. So welcome.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline.
Good morning.
Good
We're excited
morning.
to have you today.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what a day in your life looks like over there?
Sure. So I started at NMSU in about 2012. I think I returned. I went to school there for a little bit, but I went back to work there after working at the public library, and then also I was a library director in Espanola Public Library for a couple of years, but returned back to New Mexico, or back to southern New Mexico, I should say, and started working in the archives. Had never done it before, and I cannot think of another job that I would rather do than archives.
Wow.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun working in the archives. We work with the public quite a bit, not just with college students. We work a lot with researchers and historians and people who want to write articles or books. I have a whole, probably half shelf of books that authors have, thanked me for their help in researching.
nice.
And I really enjoy that. I enjoy that.
Fun.
So what started your self-proclaimed obsession with our topic today,
Oh.
Jacob?
Jacob Schaublin. Well, do you want me to start with that? I
Yeah.
can
Sure,
start with that.
yeah.
Okay, I
Let's
can
jump
start with
in.
that. I'm going to jump in with the goodies then, okay? So I'm going to show you this. In about 2018, what I have in my hand right now, and I'm going to show that to the camera. This is a 1935 funeral record book. And in about 2018.
So a funeral record book? Is that like what the funeral homes would have?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So in 1933, Herbert and Ann Nelson, they were living, I believe, in kind of the Silver City area, but they decided to come to Las Cruces and open up a funeral home. And the building that they opened the funeral home happened to be Martin Lohman's home. And they used that for their funeral home. And when they opened up their funeral home, they had to keep meticulous records of the body, who called in the funeral, the death, who the person's parents were, how much the casket cost, and just a lot of details like that. So these are fabulous records for genealogists or just people who wanting to know a little bit more about their family history, where people are buried at. So
That's amazing.
this
That
is
is.
the first book that we have, and as I've gone through the books, because I was lucky enough to process this collection. So as I was going through the books, this was the very first book that we got. When I opened up the book and I just turned to page 5, just randomly for some reason turned to page 5, and I'm gonna hand that to, well, one of you can go. Let me hand that
Let's
to you,
see,
Bern.
Bern.
Look at page 5.
Thank you.
It's kind of heavy, so don't drop it. The numbers are up at the top.
5. Aminda Lohman, daughter of,
Yeah, and so
Right.
scroll down and see who her parents were.
let's see, she was a housewife,
Age 71.
age 71, yeah. Dr. Sexton was her doctor. Name of father, Jacob Schaublin. How do I say it?
Schaublin.
Schaublin. Jacob Schaublin. His
From
birthplace, Germany. Mother's maiden name, Bertha.
Her name is misspelled, by the way. I can't even pronounce that spelling of it. But
Okay.
Yeah.
Also from Germany, right? Wow.
And you see that she's a widow. You see up at the top the person who was right at the very top on the left-hand side of the page, the person who notified of the death was a woman named Mary Carson Rice. That was a dear friend of hers, and she was a dear friend for almost her entire adult life. And eventually, I'd like to go into more detail, but I don't want to go into too much detail about Minda. But this is what started me on my journey on Jacob Schaublin, because nobody really knows too much about Jacob Schaublin. I mean, I've been at NMSU now for 12 years, and whenever I ask people if they know about Jacob Schaublin, they're like, "Who's that?" When NMSU started making wine and they were looking for a name for the wine, I suggested Jacob Schaublin because he grew grapes.
Right.
And he grew, he was a big vintner here in Las Cruces. And they're like, "Who's Jacob Schaublin?" Nobody knew who he was. And he was the man who was responsible for us becoming a land-grant college.
This, that document is so interesting. Like on there, it even had like the cost of everything. Like
Yeah.
the charge for the funeral was $3. So this looks like total footing of the bill.
Well, hers was kind of expensive because they
700.
transferred her body to California to be
Interesting.
because she eventually had Martin Lohman's body transferred to California where their son is buried. But that's a whole nother story, and I would love to tell you that story. I would love to come back another time because their story is a beautiful story, and I would
So
love
this is
to
like
share that
the
with
Lohman
you.
family.
This
like
is
the
Martin
reason
Lohman, their first mayor of
that
Las
Lohman
Cruces.
Avenue is Lohman.
Yes.
Got it.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Theirs is another story. I'd love to share that with you. It's such a good story.
Also, you think of like Dr. Sexton, which is
Yeah.
the road that's also Sexton.
Yep.
We have that road.
Yeah.
You just told us about Schaublin and I'm fascinated to get more into like his story because you just said like he is the reason we're a land grant. One of the reasons we're a land grant university.
Yes.
Yeah, this is
Yes.
cool.
Yeah.
I love
This
this.
is very
Yeah. Oh, well, and those books are wonderful. I have to put in a plug for this collection because there are all kinds of things in this collection. You can find sometimes the actual death certificates are in here, or even like sometimes. Okay, like here's one with the newspaper article about
interesting.
somebody who passed away. Sometimes there are like letters are in here. Maybe somebody put a note in here like I promise I'll come in and pay Thursday.
Wow.
Or,
Yeah.
just little details like that are in these, and it's a beautiful record of like the life and death of people who lived here, and also like a true testament of the Nelsons, of their generosity, because you could see that they were a little bit more generous to people who maybe didn't have as much money, and you can see the cost of those funerals versus somebody who was maybe a little bit more affluent, and the cost of those funerals.
Right.
So I liked doing that collection. It was pretty nice to see that.
That is very cool.
Yeah, yeah.
very amazing.
So I wanted to share that. But that's what got me started on Jacob Schaublin, because I'd never heard of him before, ever. And
Well, we did a podcast on the university, and I honestly did not come across his name
No.
when I researched that.
no, everyone hears about, I like the way you say his name, by the way, Hiram Hadley. I have a friend who's Pennsylvanian Dutch, and they pronounce it the same way.
Oh, good.
Hiram. So you're the only other one I've ever heard him pronounce that way. Everyone else says
Well, that's
Hiram.
because Burns from New York.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. So I was
Close enough to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so I was really impressed with hearing you pronounce his name that way, because I hadn't heard anybody here say Hiram Hadley.
Maybe I got it from Dennis. I don't remember.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember how I've heard Dennis pronounce his name.
Right.
I'm trying to remember. So maybe.
Right.
So,
But it's interesting, all that research I did for that topic, and his name just did not come up for me.
No. And Hiram Hadley, even when I went through Hiram Hadley's papers, I thought surely there's something in there, because I see Hiram Hadley's name in the same newspaper articles as Jacob Schaublin sometimes when they got the college incorporated. In fact, in 1888, July, they went to Santa Fe and they went to go get the college incorporated, and Jacob Schaublin was there. So was Hiram Hadley. His name is misspelled in the newspaper as Herman Hadley, but he was there. John McPhee was there, and but in Hiram's papers, he never mentions Jacob Schaublin. He'll say John McPhee, William Waddell, William Ryerson, and other people. He doesn't say his name. Does not say Jacob Schaublin. So I'm not really sure. There must have been something, that made him not want to say his name. I'm not sure.
Or maybe Jacob Schaublin preferred it that way? I mean, what a generous soul.
Yeah, it could have been. It could have been that, you know. You really don't know what the backstory is, but you don't, because, there's not a lot written about it. And, as I tell you a little bit more about Jacob, you'll see, like, why he's kind of lost in history, too. So, but I did want to tell you, just both of you, just real quickly, one of the things that I really enjoyed about learning about Jacob Schaublin was making a visit here to the court records and seeing some of the records. Cindy Chavez was very helpful to me.
Shout out to Cindy.
Yeah, shout out to Cindy. My colleague Jennifer, the archivist of the Rio Grande Historical Collections, she and I came here with one of our researchers. He met us here. And his family, he's related to, like, the Chavez, the Demetrio Chavez family, the Taylor family, the Griggs, the Fountain family. He's related to all of them. And he was here planning on doing some research. He lives in Austin. And he was telling me he was going to come. And I said, well, the next time you go to the courthouse, let me know, because Jennifer and I would like to come learn how to do some research from the courthouse. And he says, okay. So the next time he came, he let us know, and we came and did some research, and it was great to come in here. It was freezing cold, for one thing, just to let you know. Freezing cold, and there were a couple of people in there, and he told us, his name is Mike Ryan, by the way. Mike Ryan told us there was, he says, I've never seen this many people in here. Usually I'm the only one in here researching, but I think there were 3 other people in there that day. So there were a total of 6 of us in there, so Cindy was kind of busy that day, I think.
It's
So,
amazing.
but-
Sometimes
yeah.
we get people in doing genealogy. We get people in looking for deeds from back in the day.
Probate. That's what I was looking.
Probate.
And my friend went right to Bertha Chaublin's probate record. I mean, Cindy handed her a book, and my colleague Jennifer, she opened it up and went right to the record that quick.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay, it's a wrap. Let's go.
Cool. Well, let's dive in a little bit more. What else do you want to tell us about Jacob and his interesting life?
So let me tell you. Can I show you the map of the property?
Absolutely.
That he donated? Okay. So let me get to that, because that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, you keep telling us that he was so generous, and so I'm so interested to know, like, what he
so-
did.
Let me see. I thought I had it up here at the front. So this is the property. I'll hand that to you. That's what the property looks like, and it's kind of hard to tell. I mean, look at the road, like Old Mill Road. It's kind of hard to figure out, like, really how much land that is. That's about 118 acres, I think, according to that surveyor. But it's hard to tell. And so I have a friend that works here at the county. He's a county surveyor. I don't know if you know Ben Carter here. He's a county surveyor here with the county. So I asked him, hey, Ben, can you show me what it looks like right now, like if we were to look at that property using the description on the deed and looking at that map? And so he gave me an approximation of what that property looks like
currently.
Currently.
That's
Very
so cool.
cool.
He's amazing. And I was really happy to see it, because to see it the way it looks now, it's a huge amount of property. It's an expensive amount of property. And why is this man's name everywhere?
Exactly.
Why isn't more?
So what part of town is this? Do we know?
Yeah.
Trying to figure it out.
So okay, you can see the horseshoe there.
This is NMSU then.
This is NMSU's
Oh,
property.
okay. So there's Hadley.
Uh-huh.
There's the horseshoe. Okay.
So part
So
of the
this is the
horseshoe was part of the
new-
property. All of the ag area.
There's
A
the
part of
Starbucks.
I-10. They say I-10.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I-10.
Yeah. So all of that property in red is
That's amazing.
mm-hmm.
That is so cool.
It's a lot of property.
Yeah. So with that property, this building here is called the Seed House. That building came with the property, and that property was used as part of the first part of the college. They used that building. They used it for dances. They used it for meetings. They called it the Seed House. I'm assuming they had seeds in it. I'm not really sure why they called it the Seed House. They still sometimes call it the Seed House. But that building's still used today.
I was gonna say that's still there.
It's still there. They still use it today.
I want to say it's which one is it? Sorry.
It's kind of behind. It's kind of behind the
wonder if
Marriott
it's there.
Hotel
No,
by the.
okay, I'm
Sequia.
totally wrong there. Like I
Yeah.
thought it's one of these older buildings
kind
over
of by
here,
the police department.
but then it's over here somewhere.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's not by the horseshoe.
No, it's across.
Because there are some old buildings right there by the horseshoe. that
Yes,
are-
yeah.
But I'm assuming it's got to be one of those then.
Kind of on the agricultural
Yes,
side.
yeah, all of
Okay.
that agricultural side.
Very cool.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So,
Thank you.
anyways, and I'll let you guys keep these if you want them
Oh,
for
that
your
would be
for
awesome.
your website.
We can
so.
post that,
Yeah.
Jacob,
Yes,
right?
but you have to give a shout out to Ben Carter for that.
Okay.
That's
Yeah,
an approximation
absolutely.
for your own county.
And he's a surveyor here with the
Yeah.
county.
Yes, he
Okay,
is,
we'll
yeah,
find him.
Yeah, so yeah, it was really nice of him to do that for me. I appreciate that. So yeah, I just wanted to give you that information, and then so Jacob, one of the things that I felt like was important about Jacob is that not only was he generous with the university, he did a lot of things within the city, but he first came, just to give you like a little bit background. He came from Germany about the 1850s, went to New York.
Okay.
Maybe you know him.
Maybe we're related.
Maybe. he didn't know English when he came, and it took him about 8 years to learn English, and then he decided to go to Texas, of all places. I'm not sure what led him to Texas, but he went to San Antonio, Texas. And
Well, there's such a large German community
There
in
is.
that area,
There
in Hill
is.
Country.
right. So maybe they all came together, but yeah, there is. So he went to Texas. It doesn't say who he went with, his family, or who he went with, but eventually he made his way to Las Cruces in the 1860s, and he ended up in Oregon, and he started a mining business. So he must have had a little bit of money, because he started the mining business with Phoebus Freudenthal. Do you know the
I
Freudenthal
don't know
name?
that name.
Freudenthal name is a very important name also as far as Mesilla Valley pioneers. But he started a mining company with Phoebus Freudenthal, and he bought a lot of property in Oregon. He was one of the first property owners in Oregon. And I noticed that on his property that I'm thinking he was a pretty shrewd guy, because you know how the plots are, kind of like this. He would buy a plot of land right in the middle of all these other plots, just one little plot, while everybody else was buying like 3 or 4, and then one little plot around 3 or 4 other. I'm like, he's buying one plot right in the middle so that they're going to have to buy him out eventually if they want to make that
Wow.
property.
That's
bigger.
smart.
Oh, it's very smart. So I'm not sure if that was his thought, but that's what I would have done if I was, thinking
Right.
like this property's selling, and that's what he did. And he did buy one corner lot that was a little bit bigger, so I'm wondering if that was where he lived at. I'm not sure, but that was the bigger lot. But after about 1865, I can't find any record of that other than books that other people have written. Dr. Gordon Nolan, a historian at NMSU, he mentions that Jacob goes to back to San Antonio to marry Bertha Schaublin. He goes to woo her, is what he says.
Oh.
So
Okay.
he finally makes enough money, because that Blackhawk mine that he owns has copper, gold, and silver. So he made quite a bit of money. And plus he bought all that property too. But he goes back to woo Bertha. And Bertha's, I believe, 21 years younger than he is.
Substantial.
Yeah. So, but
And she was also German, as we saw on
She
her
was-
the death record you showed us.
yes.
So interesting. I wonder how that happened. Like, like a family arrangement or something like that? Like, I don't know. How interesting that he went back to San Antonio
Right.
to marry a German woman who had also come to America.
Right, right. And I couldn't find a record of when she came. Yeah, I couldn't find a record when she came. I know when he came back to Las Cruces, or back this direction, they also brought her younger brother with him.
Okay.
And his name is something like Johann Wilhelm Theodore Orensorgen or something. I'm not pronouncing any of it right, I'm sure, except for maybe Johann. but they brought him back with them, and he becomes a very popular and famous person in Arizona history, by the way, later on. But and it's because of him that I'm able to trace some of Jacob Schaublin in the Arizona area.
Oh, interesting.
But Jacob, when Catherine Stows was a historian here in Las Cruces, and so she has some information about Jacob Schaublin. And one of the things that she says in her papers is that, in an article that she wrote, was that Bertha Schaublin had a child, and that Jacob took that child as his own. And she says that they got married in 1865. And I see that Aminda was maybe born like in 1863. So I'm like, well, maybe that's a true story.
Right.
But she's saying that Jacob Schaublin's her father on her death certificate. So I don't know. I can't find a birth certificate for her. So I don't know. It could be a true story. It may not be. I don't know. But I mean, if it is, you know, I mean, what a good testament of that is of his generosity and his character, you know, because it seemed like he really loved her, you know, his daughter, both his daughters very much, and his sons.
How interesting. So what else? I mean, I'm so interested, like, you keep talking about more of his generosity. So he ended up, I guess, how is he related to New Mexico State? You mentioned the wine, so he was a grower also. So I guess what brought him to Doña Ana County?
Yeah. So
after Oregon and after marrying Bertha.
So they for whatever reason they go to Arizona, and they start in Tucson. They start off in Tucson. In fact, Jacob, while he's in Tucson, Benson, Arizona area, he helped start the Democratic Party in the territory of Arizona. He helped start it, and that's documented in their newspapers and also in the library. But he helped start that there. The very first Democratic, also the convention, they're going to plan it for Phoenix that following year. So he helped start that, and he's the representative, I believe, for, I think it was Pima County. I can't remember now, but he helped start that. So
now, at that time, the Republicans were kind of like
they were swapped
to today's Democrats, and Democrats were closer to today's Republicans.
Yeah, and it's funny because when Jacob comes back here, for some reason he decides to switch to Republican. By the way, so just to let you know, he does switch, but he at the very beginning he starts off as a Democrat in Arizona. And he goes to kind of I don't know if you're very familiar with Arizona, but kind of like the Tombstone area, and there's a little station that's not there now, but it used to be called the San Pedro Station, and a little ranching area called Tres Alamos. And he helped start the San Pedro Station, which is like a station like for, you know, stagecoaches and also military. And I was able to find some military records that mentioned Jacob Schaublin. I was also able to find, because of the brother-in-law, more information about the station, because he bought the station from Jacob Schaublin. So there's very little records of Jacob owning it, except for like 2 newspaper articles about it, and also a newspaper, or not a newspaper, but the U.S. Postal Office, because Jacob started the first post office in San Pedro. He was the first postmaster in San Pedro, Arizona.
So this guy is undercover, but got his hands in a lot of things.
Yeah, he was. He was very progressive and started a lot of things and tried to make things happen for a lot of people. And I mean, like, he donated a chalkboard to the little school in Benson. I mean, he was always doing things to help people, especially education-wise. But as far as we know, he didn't have an education. He didn't have much of an education his own self, but he seemed like to be self-taught, and he was very smart, like engineer-wise, like trying to build things and fix things. Yeah. And so you said that you found some newspaper articles about his generosity.
I did. I just found article after article about how well liked he was. It was best exhibit, 3 or more varieties by Messiah parties. Best bushel of spring wheat, Jacob Schaublin. Best corn, so-and-so, Newcomb it was actually. So that is, I guess, the competition for like our 4-H club today kind of thing. An honest Jacob Schaublin is known by everyone and needs no introduction. He has served the county the past 2 years as collector. Everyone is satisfied with his efficient services, and he will not be elected by a rousing, and he will again be elected by a rousing majority. And
So collector, that was the treasurer?
I think it was
So he was both. He was the tax collector, and then I guess later on, like in 1890, he was called the treasurer, but he was the tax assessor.
Okay, so
collector.
assessor and then
And
treasurer.
then,
Okay.
then the treasurer. In 1890, they started calling him a treasurer. So
Okay.
I guess they changed it.
And then
Interesting.
I love this. I found an ad for him for his flour mill.
Oh, yeah.
Keep constantly the best of flour.
Oh, that's a nice ad.
Yeah.
So what year was that at, by the way?
This one is 1882 in the Las Cruces Rio Grande Republican.
Okay, 1882. Okay,
82.
so that was after the drought in 1879. So I was just curious because I was curious like when that was, because there was a drought in 1879, and I'll tell you about that too.
Okay.
But yeah, so but I'm glad you found those articles because there's several articles about his generosity and how good he was. We have another collection called the Corey Bowman, and her and her husband wrote letters back and forth to each other when they were engaged, and he was in Albuquerque. He was a doctor, Dr. Lyon, and they would write letters to each other. And in her letters, for their wedding, she says, just real briefly, a little note, she says, Mrs. Schaublin's giving us all her flowers in her garden for our wedding. Isn't that wonderful? She's giving them to him. She's not selling it to him. She's
Right.
giving them to him. They were just really
people.
generous, good people, and seemed to help people. And I enjoyed finding that out about him because it made me realize, okay, so it is believable that this guy would give that much property for a college to start
Right.
a land grant college.
Right.
So, yeah.
I mean, I was talking to William, one of our Bureau of Election people, and I was telling him, he asked me what the podcast was about this week. And I said, what would incentivize someone to give away that land? And he's like, a tax credit. And I'm like, I don't know. At that time,
I don't think there were
it wasn't even a
Yeah.
state.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we were a territory.
Were
then.
tax
Right.
credits a thing at that time? I have no idea. Yeah.
I don't know. Where's your tax assessor? Yeah.
Right.
That's so interesting. So I guess, okay, so what brought him to Doñana?
So the story goes according to their family, because I was able to talk to some of their family members,
cool.
distant family members, because Jacob Schaublin had 2 daughters and 2 sons. One daughter had a child and she died during childbirth. Emily died during childbirth. And so her son became an orphan because the father of that child died soon afterwards. And so the Schaublins raised that son. His name was Emil. And he was the one who ended up ultimately inheriting pretty much all of the property that the Schaublins owned. And he sold a lot of it for fairly cheap because he was living in California and he wanted to get away pretty much. But he has some descendants, and those are the people I were able to speak
Wow.
to through Ancestry.com. I was able to get in touch with them. And
You dug deep, huh?
Oh, yeah, I love doing this kind of stuff. So we emailed back and forth and had a couple of phone calls too with the woman. I believe her last name was Van Zant, but I know her first name was Aaron. So, we were able to communicate. But she gave me some good information that she knew. But I know one of the stories is that Jacob Schaublin was told by, I believe it was Cochise, a friend of Cochise in that area, that he had to leave because there was going to be a battle and that they needed to leave. There was going to be some kind of an Indian army skirmish, and they had to leave that area. And according to the family lore, that Jacob Schaublin left like immediately. He, within probably weeks, packed up his family and left. I haven't been able to find anything in the newspapers that prove that there was any kind of a skirmish during that time in that area, but there could have been, and just not written about. I don't know. But he did leave in 1974. He did leave, and he came to Las Cruces and immediately, bought some property and then bought the Schaublin, or the farm, the old, they called it the flouring mill, the Las Cruces flouring mill, and he bought that right away. And it's a giant piece of property. I was showing Bern right before you came in, Carolina. I want to show you the property. The property used to be, originally, there was a man named Cordoba who built this, like in the, I'm not even going to guess at the time period, but this map is from, and I'll show this to the camera in just a second. Let me look at the date, 1853. And this is actually from your guys' records here in the courthouse. But this is a map of the Las Cruces area from 1853. And just real quickly, the gardens that I'm going to be talking about are from here, and then Draper's Mill is down here at the bottom. That's the property that Jacob Schaublin bought
Thank you.
to start his garden and his flouring mill, which was already there. But he improved the flouring mill so that the flouring mill was making 1,000 pounds of flour a day, and
So
it was
this
running 24
is-
hours a day.
Okay, so is this that plot of land that you showed us earlier, or where is this?
This is where he lives at. This is
Okay.
his home. That was just his
Okay, so
ranch.
there's Picacho,
And you can see the
Water Street,
the convent or the
the
church.
church.
Uh-huh.
So Mesquite, St. Peter Street, Campo, Church. There's Water Street. So between, I'm trying to think of like where it is now.
I know.
This is where that double street is. You know, like downtown Plaza area.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And if this is where all his gardens were, Alameda used to be that river. If you know, like old map.
Old
of Las
maps.
Cruces,
Wow.
Which is why I have to pay so much in flood insurance.
Oh yeah.
Because I live off of
Oh.
Alameda, because it used to be a river.
I used to live in that area too.
yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
And so if that's where all his gardens were, which makes sense, because the river was close by.
Wow. So Jacob will get a,
Yeah, we'll put this online for sure.
we'll get a close-up, a link to it or something.
You can have that. That's a copy. That's a reproduction. So
That is
Oh,
so
that looks so
cool.
nice. I gotta take the Mylar back, but you can have the map because it's a
Beautiful.
reproduction. So
And I like the
yeah,
it's
little-
almost a wheat symbol
Yeah.
on the, what do you call that?
the
the
scale. Is
directional.
it the scale? Yeah,
Very cool.
Yeah, and we have another map similar to this one, and it actually like says like who owns what property.
Oh, that is so
And
cool.
that is really nice because it's just kind of hand penciled in. And I think maybe Mary Taylor did that. I can't remember who wrote those that information.
That would be
It's kinda
so
cool.
fun to have if you could ever send us a copy. That would be
Yeah,
really cool
yeah,
to
I'll
have.
look for it.
Yeah.
If you're really interested, I'll look for it because it is kind of nice to see. Those things are always nice, because people don't realize like, hey, my grandma used to live there, my great great grandma used to
Wow.
live there. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like a third generation Las Crucen, and my mom on my family's been here longer on my dad's side. On my mom's side, like my mom grew up in the Mesquite district, which is right there off Mesquite that you see on that. And so I would just love to see the old family
Oh,
names
yeah.
that are still
Yeah.
that were there, you know?
Yeah. Not all the names are filled in, but a lot of them are filled in.
Yeah.
So that is kind of cool to see. So, but yeah. So he bought a lot of property, and so he grew like grapes and peaches and oranges. I mean oranges in Las Cruces, apples, pears, just all kinds of things. But one of the things he did, again, speaking to his generosity, is that when malaria came and hit the area, he was trying to think like, how can I help these people? How can I help my community? And so he ordered a bunch of eucalyptus trees, and he sent for them, I believe, in California at his own expense, and he had them shipped in on the train. So it had to be after 1881. I don't remember the date, but the trains didn't come until 1881. So it had to be after 1881 because he had them shipped in by train, and they came in, and he planted them along his vineyards. So I'm not really sure where his vineyards were, but they said he planted them on the south side of his vineyards. So like I'm not sure how big his vineyards were, and so it didn't say how many trees there were. Now eucalyptus trees, they found out like during the railroads in California that some people weren't getting malaria in these areas, and they're thinking like, well, we have a lot of eucalyptus trees here. Why aren't that must be why we're not getting malaria in this area. But it wasn't because of that. I don't know if you guys know the significance of that, but eucalyptus trees do not need a lot of water. They don't need a lot of water, so they're not soaking those trees like you are apple trees.
So if you're
or
not soaking
oranges
them,
trees.
you're not getting the mosquitoes.
Exactly. So that's why
Interesting.
they didn't have malaria there. So his heart was in the right place. His brain wasn't.
Yeah.
I guess you
Yeah.
could say. He didn't know. His understanding wasn't. But it was a nice concept. And there's a newspaper article about that, and they talk about he's doing an experiment. And I thought, well, that was really cool that
At his expense.
at his own expense, but he was trying to figure out like how to help the community, and like maybe he thought like if this works then everybody should plant them, but
Right.
yeah, but I don't know. I've never seen a eucalyptus tree here in Las Cruces, so apparently it didn't take.
Right.
Yeah, I've never seen one. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Interesting.
yeah. I know we have a eucalyptus street, but
Yep.
that wasn't his property, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Not him.
So that's so interesting that like all of his gardens, I mean, it's like the span of the city.
Mhm.
Like he really had a huge,
Yeah.
like these like blocks and blocks and blocks.
Yes. Yeah. When you look at it, it goes all the way up to Picacho.
Mm-hmm.
So just that whole area was his. Yeah. So there's one article when they're talking about starting the new school, and I think it was Simon Newcomb, by the way, who says this in the newspaper, in his newspaper, because he had the newspaper 34, and I believe it's him who says this in the newspaper. He says, "Why don't we start the new school on Jacob Schaublin's property, right across from Amador's property, so on the underside of the ditch." So, I'm trying to figure out, okay, so like on the underside of the ditch, he doesn't mean like underneath the ditch. He just means like on this side of the ditch, but across from Amador's property. And, he's trying to like give a specific location. And so I'm like, I really have to like look at a map and see if I can
Right.
figure out what area he's talking about. But he was saying everybody who comes into town will be able to see it. It'll be a beautiful school. It'll be a nice area. But, again, because Jacob was generous, like a lot of people asked things of him, and so here this guy's trying to get him, like, why don't you donate
Right.
this
Right.
property for the school,
Right.
so, but this is before the college, they donated the property for the college, but yeah.
That is so interesting. I love this. So, okay, so yeah, what's next? What did he do after?
So,
Yeah.
okay, so after he started the flouring mill, let's see, what else did he do? Well, so I told you that he had 4 children. So he had Aminda, who was the oldest, and then I believe Emily was the second, and then he had his 2 sons, Jacob Jr. and Henry. So one of the things that was hard to do the research is that, okay, Schaublin is always misspelt. It's either the C is missing in SCH, so the C is either missing, or it's spelled CHA, and the U's missing. It's just it was always hard to find. I found his name spelled so many different ways, but then for some reason they started calling him Hawkes Schaublin. Or Javier Schaublin, So yeah,
Interesting.
so I would find things that would talk about Javier Schaublin. I'm like, who's Javier Schaublin?
And just because the area we're in, like you would think he had to know some Spanish. He just had to.
Oh yeah. I'm sure he did speak Spanish because he was friends with a lot of the Spanish-speaking people. So I'm sure he spoke Spanish, although I haven't seen anything that specifically said he spoke Spanish. But it did say that he was friends to the Mexican people, so and the Spanish-speaking people. But nothing that I have found specifically says he spoke Spanish. Yeah, but so many people did back then. They much more bilingual people back then than here.
Had to be.
Mhm. Yeah. It was the trade, and he was a merchant. He traded a lot in Arizona, and then of course his work in the mines, and probably when he was in Texas too, he probably picked up English and Spanish. Yeah.
Trilingual.
Probably
At
was.
least.
Oh yeah, at the very least. Yeah, and he
Right.
probably some French too, because some of his friends were also French too. So yeah, I'm sure he knew a little bit of everything. Yeah. So anyway, so his daughter ends up marrying Martin Lohman. His daughters are actually very popular with some of the in crowd, like the Bowmans, the Amadors, the Armijos, the let me see, the Fountains. They're friends with everybody whose name is in the paper.
Somebody,
Their
yeah.
names are in the paper too. So they end up being, I guess kind of not really the bells of the balls, but they get around and people know them. And there's sometimes I read in the newspaper like okay, on a Monday evening, there's the Monday newspaper or the Tuesday newspaper, and they're talking about the party that happened last night, and it went till 2 a.m. on a Monday night. I'm like, what?
Well,
Don't these
today is
people work?
National Tequila Day, so
Right,
it's a Wednesday.
I should go back and see what day of the week or what was happening then, you know.
Right.
But yeah, but they had a party on a Monday night till 2 a.m. They danced until 2
Wow.
a.m. You know, on a Monday night, and they talked about, you know, like, you know, both Aminda and Emily were there, and, you know, like the different people were there. But one of the things that I started to notice is that Martin Lohman and Aminda were at these parties, you know, the same time, and their names are mentioned, but they're never mentioned like he was our escort or anything like that. But then, you know, pretty soon, you know, their engagement's announced, and
Okay.
so that was, I think, kind of a coup for Jacob Schaublin for his daughter to marry Martin Lohman, because he was him and his brothers were the bachelors in town and very successful men. All three of them
Right.
were successful here in town, and merchants. All three of them were merchants, and very successful. And I think for his daughter to have married him, it was a good union for both of them, both for Martin too, you know,
Okay.
because his father-in-law was quite successful then, you know, and it was a good union
Right.
for all around.
Right.
So yeah, so it was a good.
It's amazing how the names keep repeating in different topics or stories that we
Yeah.
read, just the
Yeah.
same old names and who owned this and who owned that and who married who.
Yeah, you know, no, they definitely married. I think they definitely married for convenience and property. You know, there had to be some love in there too, but they definitely married for, you know, like for, you know, like can you imagine your parents saying, "Oh, you have to marry this neighbor of ours because, you know, they have 6 cows and we only have 1 bull, so you have to marry that neighbor."
Those were the
How
days.
interesting.
You
Yeah.
have to marry that son. Yeah.
How interesting. So I'm wondering, so how did the whole NMSU land
So
exchange happen?
so okay, so there was several people involved that had to. Okay, Hiram Hadley was one that was kind of a not an instigator, but he was one that saw like a need that had to happen, as you mentioned in your previous podcast. But John McPhee, and I'm trying to remember if you talked very much about John McPhee in your podcast.
Not much.
Yeah. So John McPhee, he, I believe at that time he was a judge, but he also was very influential in getting the college started. In fact, he was one of the people who helped incorporate the college. When they went to go get the college incorporated, he was one of the ones who went to go get that. He was the one who signed the paperwork to get the college donated. His name is on that signature on the deed. He's the one who signed that deed. So, but the college had to have had a certain amount of property already for the college to become a land grant college. And so at that time there were 4 possibilities, and I don't know if you know, but there was like, so there was an insane asylum, there was the mining school, and forget what the 4th one was. But Socorro got the mining school, Las Vegas got the insane asylum, and we got the land grant college. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And so, but we needed the property. We needed at least 100 acres. And so Jacob Schaublin donated 118 acres so that we could do that. And it was just in the nick of time. It had to be done, but like by February 28th and that's when the papers were signed.
Wow.
And yeah.
You know, this is blowing my mind because things that are still like you think about like what's that saying? Like newspapers are the first rough draft of history, and you think of like Las Vegas still has the mental facility for inmates, things like that is the only one in the state, I believe. Of course, NMSU is still around.
Yeah.
And so you just think of like all these decisions that happened so long ago that still affect us and still have an impact on our world today.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
Yeah, and we're and I'm glad you said that, because I don't know if because it's a state-run facility. I don't know if they can like just decide like, oh, we're just going to shut this.
Yeah, I don't think they can.
Yeah. So it's got to remain open. You know, I think the same thing with us. You know, I don't think we can just like shut our doors someday.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, during COVID, of course, we had to, but you know, I mean, we still had to function. Like we were, like our archives were open, even though the building was closed. We were online. I couldn't believe like how quick we were online and servicing people like online, like doing this, like like some of us had scanners at home and we were scanning records. We would take home things at home and we were scanning things.
Wow.
We were processing collections.
The
Like
show must go on.
the show went
Yeah.
on. Yeah, the show went on. So we didn't actually shut our doors. We just didn't let people in.
Yeah.
So, but we were working during that time, and we got a lot done. We even did some little videos. We never even thought about doing podcasts though. It was like we never
Let's see
went that
yet.
far. We didn't have a Jacob.
need
Shout out to
Jacob.
Jacob. So yay, Doñana in Las Cruces, we got the land grant university. At the time, it was called the Agriculture.
It was called the Las Cruces College first. When it was
Interesting,
incorporated,
okay.
it was called the Las Cruces College first, and then the Agricultural College and Mechanical Arts,
Yes.
and then I believe in the 60s it got changed to New Mexico State University. But shout out to New Mexico State University. We are the oldest college in New Mexico.
Yeah.
We're the
Yep. Take
oldest.
that, UNM.
Yeah, take that. Because I mean, even though they took Hiram Hadley from us, they didn't take our status from us.
Yeah. Very cool. So he ends up, we needed the land. And so how did he?
So he donated it. His friend Numa Raymond, he had a friend named Numa Raymond who was also one of these people in history. You see Raymond Street, that's Numa Raymond. So, and his wife, Katie Raymond, she was the one who was very instrumental in getting Pioneer Park.
Oh, she was
There.
one of the
She-
active women.
Yeah, in the Women's Improvement Association. Yes. So she was one of those women. So, and also helping get the library open with Brannigan, Mrs. Brannigan, Alice Brannigan. So she was very active too. She wasn't one of those women just sat around at home. They never had children, so she was always very active in doing things. But Numa Raymond was his friend, and there's a lot of like buying and selling going on with property, and it's hard to tell. Sometimes, you know, like you saw the deed, you found the deed in your records. I found the deed also, looking up some stuff with the state, and then also in some other like books that were printed from the state, you know, like old 1870 or 1880 books I've found copies of. But there's question, you know, like some authors have questioned whether he really donated the property or if he sold it. And I have not found anything that says he did not sell the property. Like no document shows that he did not sell the property. Everything I see shows that he donated the property. And so
And that kind of falls in line with the person and the character we knew prior to
yes.
that.
Yeah. That falls in line with everything that I have seen about him. So I'm happy to see that. But his friend Numa Raymond sold a lot of property, and I'm finding deeds that he sold property, and he sold a lot of property, especially after Jacob died, that Mrs. Schaublin owned. So I'm not sure how that came to be. Like, how did he get his hands on that property? So eventually, I'd like to go back and look, like, how did this get there? But the person who was doing the I don't know if he was the realtor or the I don't even know the right terminology, but maybe he was the attorney. I think he was the attorney. It was Numa Raymond's nephew, who was his name was Numa Frenger, and he's named after his uncle. And so he just signs everything N Frenger, you know, because he doesn't want to confuse the name, you know, I guess maybe. But he signs everything N Frenger on the paperwork. But it's his nephew who's signing all the paperwork, and he'll say something like, I don't have the deed here, but I do have a copy of it in my office, you know, but he doesn't present it, you know. So, I mean, it could be all legitimate, but I haven't seen it all, so I'd like to see everything before but as far as I'm concerned.
You're on a mission.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, Jacob Schaublin donated the property fair and square, and, you know, we have what we have because of him and his generosity.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I do want to tell you that Aminda Schaublin and Martin Loman have their own story, and it's a really great story. I'd love to share that with you guys someday.
Oh, we would welcome you back.
It's a great story. And I do want to tell you that Jacob Schaublin died in 1905. He had rheumatism for years, and I don't know if you saw in any of the papers, they would say, "Old Uncle Jake is ill today." That would be the headline of the paper. "Old Uncle Jake is ill today. His rheumatism got the best of him." Or "Old Uncle Jake's bones are aching." That would be in the newspaper. I mean, can you imagine waking up to a newspaper and seeing that about you, Bern? Like, old Auntie Bern.
Well, they do have a nickname here as Granny.
Oh, well, but at least it's not in the paper,
True.
I wouldn't want to see that.
Right.
Old Granny Teddie is
But maybe
aching
that's
today.
just how they felt about him.
Yes.
I mean, a grandfatherly
Yeah.
energy about
Yes,
him or
yeah,
something.
yeah, but that would be in the paper about him
Wow.
being ill and that his bones, and he was always like, you'd see like Jacob Schaublin and his wife traveled to Hudson Springs, and Hudson Springs is Faywood Springs, like on your way to Silver City, and so it was a healing hot springs. That's what it was known for back then, was the healing hot springs. So him and his wife would travel to Hudson Springs, and they would come back, and then they would travel to other hot springs. They were always traveling to hot springs, and probably for some healing,
Relief, yeah.
for some relief for his rheumatism,
Right.
because that's what they said. Rheumatism. I don't even know what rheumatism is. What is that? What would you say?
I mean, I
Arthritis?
think it's like similar to arthritis. Yeah.
Right. That's what I would think.
assuming.
Arthritis. Yeah. So, but apparently it was pretty debilitating, because like it would put him in bed for days.
Oh.
Yeah. And
think about how, welcoming this climate is for
Yeah.
arthritis. He had to be really debilitated to
not
have that in the paper.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That he was so ill that he was out for days. And
Wow.
Well, anything else you want to tell us about Jacob Schaublin?
well, there was a time when like half the town caught on fire in the early, I want to say probably mid 80s, and it started in somebody's like restaurant barn area, and I can't remember the person's name, but it just continued everywhere, and not in his area, but further down. And it just like from property to property, and it almost was kind of, because it would skip a property and go to another property, so it was almost kind of like somebody purposely set those fires. And so Jacob Schaublin was one of the people who helped pay like a reward to catch whoever had done this fire, started this fire. And other people too, the other townspeople had pitched in to help do it, because I mean, can you imagine like trying to put out a fire back then?
Yeah.
And especially like
Just
hay,
running in
a
with
barn.
buckets. Yeah.
Yeah, how awful, right? And that was like such a small article too. I mean, the reward part was, I think, more of a bigger story than like all these people who lost part of their restaurant and their barns. And I think somebody lost some animals too in that fire. So, but yeah, going back to Jacob Schaublin's death when he passed away, I could not find like an obituary or any articles.
I couldn't
but
either.
He died at an odd time in newspaper history, and I think Caroline, you might have said that you guys, was it you who said in a former podcast that you guys have to keep all the newspapers? Was that you?
Do.
So is that just for Las Cruces or for Doña Ana County or for New Mexico? Whose papers are you keeping?
So it's actually by statute, if I'm not wrong, Bern, you might know
I
better
think
than I
so.
do. By statute, we do have to keep them, and there are certain criteria that the newspaper has to meet to be considered like an archival type of thing.
So Doña Ana County newspapers?
Doña Ana County, I can assume, but also I don't know when that law started. So I don't know how far back our archive actually goes.
Okay. So I was kind of curious about that, because like there's kind of a gap in newspaper coverage, and so we have some on microfilm, we have some digitally, we have some hard copy, and I have had a difficult time trying to find things or an obituary on them. I see Santa Fe paper, a little tiny article. I see also El Paso Times has like a little blurb that he's passed away. I see they mention it in the Las Cruces, one of the Las Cruces paper, that he's passed away. But I thought there would be something bigger,
Right.
s-
Given who he was
yeah.
to the area.
And then I believe it was Adlai Feather, who was another historian. He talks about it being like his funeral being a big affair. He says, "Oh, Jacob Schaublin, the whole town turned out for his affair
That
or for
sounds
his
right.
funeral." He said the whole town turned out for his funeral, and he said it was a big affair. And then another attorney in town, his last name was Holt, and you probably know the house. I'll tell you the house, and you'll know what house I'm talking about. It's a house on the corner of Picacho and Alameda, and it's got like that kind of weird little like.
The 2-story one?
It's a 2-story house, and it's right across from the courthouse now in the back. That's got like a second-story little curved window up on top.
Like turrets?
Yeah, turrets. Thank you.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of what the word was. That was the whole H.B. Holt's home. And so he was an attorney who lived here, and that was his home. Well, his wife is writing letters to him because he traveled a lot in the 1800s, and she's writing letters to him. And so in her letters, she writes, she writes about Jacob Schaublin. She says, poor Jacob Schaublin passed away, and I sang at his funeral.
Oh.
And so she was pretty upper class, high class woman, and so she sang at his funeral. So I'm thinking, okay, she would not just do that for anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
And she did that. So, she was not just going to go out and sing at anybody's. She wouldn't sing at my funeral, I'm sure. She'd sing at yours and yours.
I don't know about that.
She would sing at mine.
How interesting. Yeah, I mean, we'll have to. I know, Bern, you didn't find any. I don't know where else we can look. I'm sure there's some place that we can try to find an obit for him.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I went to the state. I didn't go. I
Archive?
talked to the state archives, and they couldn't find his death record. There's like a gap. There's a gap, and you guys don't have it here either. So I could not find his death record.
Yeah.
There's like no death record on him for either one, because there's a gap between you guys and them, and they don't have it either. So, but
Maybe that's something we'll find miracle.
I would
Miraculous.
Right?
Honestly,
We'll
one
just
day.
open. Yes. You'd be surprised.
I
I
did
would-
find Pat Garrett's death certificate.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we basically opened it, found it in one of the old books.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Well, that would be
let's cross our fingers for
Yeah.
Jacob.
That would be cool to find, because I'm sure it's going to say that he had rheumatism, but who knows? Maybe he was shot, or maybe he fell off a
right.
horse. Who
Yeah.
knows?
knows?
I don't know how he
Right.
passed away. But speaking of the way that people passed away, one of the things that I noticed when my colleague was looking at Bertha Schaublin's probate record, on her probate record, it said on, you know how they list the things that they own, like a dresser, brush, dishes. One of the things that was in her probate was a check from the Bureau of Reclamation for like $165. And
Bureau of Reclamation. What would that be?
that would be like Elephant Butte, like
Okay.
basically because her son, Jacob Jr., worked for the Bureau of Reclamation. And so in 1924, he was helping build the dam, I guess, kind of by El Paso. I'm not really sure. Oops, excuse me. I'm not exactly sure where he was working at, but he, according to some oral historians, he blew himself up with
Oh,
TNT.
Oh my gosh.
But he lived. And they took him to El Paso, and he was at Hotel Dieu, and he survived a few hours at Hotel Dieu, and he did eventually die. And so on his death certificate, because I do have his death certificate, it says, died from explosion, TNT explosion, and then his name is misspelled too on his death certificate, but it says something like person responsible or something on the death certificate, and it says Bureau of Reclamation. So I wondered, like, now is that
Did you get a check from them because
Yeah.
because it was a work accident type thing? Or?
Yeah, I wondered, like, is that like a yearly check, $186, $168? Does that come every year, or is that like a one-time check? And she thought, this is not worth the life of my son. I'm never cashing it. I
Right.
wondered what that one check was.
Oh, some more digging.
I know.
That is so interesting.
Yeah. So I was like, maybe you guys know, but you guys are just as fascinated.
Yeah,
by that
we
as me, I
are.
can tell.
That would be
your guys' eyes are as big as mine were when I saw that. Yeah. So okay. So
Death by explosion.
yeah, I know. He had such a dangerous job. I mean,
Yeah.
can you imagine?
I'm sure like TNT regulations were nothing at the time.
Oh yeah, I'm
So-
sure OSHA was not around
Yeah,
back then.
yeah.
It's like, here, hold that, stick it dynamite. Don't move.
Yeah. That's so interesting. So anything else you want to tell us before we wrap things up?
No, I think I've got like all the main details about Jacob that I wanted to share.
So interesting. Have you thought of writing a book?
No, but I've been wanting to work on an article, and every time I I make sure that I cite my source so I can go back to it, and like so I can be sure that that's an exact source, because so many things that I've looked at are wrong. And I'll go back and look. They'll say, "Oh, I found this in the Las Cruces Sun News," and I'll go back and I'm like, "That is not in the Las Cruces Sun
Oh,
News."
gosh.
So a lot of the sources that I've looked at from other people's writings, it's not correct.
accurate.
It's not accurate. And so I've been being very meticulous about taking my sources down, because I want to be able that if somebody ever wants to check them, that they can go back and look at that research, or maybe they're researching somebody else, like John McPhee or Hiram Hadley. They
Right.
want to check that source, and that they may not be interested in Jacob, but they're interested in somebody else that I'm mentioning in the article, and then they can go back and find that
Right.
accurately.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think you should. I mean, I
Thank
would,
you.
I think you should write a book. I think that'd be so interesting. Man, I think we should have you back to do some other episodes.
Thank you.
I would love
yeah.
if you came back and talked
Oh,
about
you
Martin
Yeah.
Lohman.
you
and-
would love that story. I'm not kidding. You would love that story.
Okay, that's a segue.
I honestly want to do just an
That is a
episode
segue.
on the death books.
Oh, yeah. Oh gosh, I would love
Yeah.
to do that.
Would that the collection that you have, like just on the death books, I think would be so interesting.
Well, so you did a podcast at the Armijo House. Could you come to the archives and do a podcast? 'Cause
Yeah, we
could.
can.
could spread
We are
those
mobile,
out.
right? Look at Jacob, so
Oh.
excited. He's like, "Yes, we
Field
can."
trip.
Field trip.
Oh, you guys would love being in there, and you would love to see, because there's, I believe, 15 volumes total.
Oh, that's so
Wow.
cool.
Yeah, I believe there's 15 volumes. So
Let's do it. Let's set it up. Yep, put it on the schedule.
Okay, all right. So
Thank
and
you
so,
so much.
So then maybe my colleague Jennifer, who's the archivist of the RGHC. I mean, I process the collection, but she's actually the archivist, so she would probably love to be part of that too.
Absolutely, and
That'd
I'm
be
thinking like some
great.
of our staff, like Angelica and Cindy,
They would love
they
it.
would love
yeah.
to go.
Oh yeah. Angelica's been to the archives. We've given her a tour, but
Awesome.
we would love to have her back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll set it up. We'll make it happen.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think that's it for today's episode. I just want to thank you both for being here. Thank you for this really fun topic. We learned so much about Jacob and his life, and it's so interesting. Like without him, we would not have New Mexico State University. And I'm a 2-time Aggie, so that would make me sad. So, but no,
Aggies.
yeah, go Aggies. Take that in UNM. Yeah, thank you all for being here. We're going to have you back. This podcast will be up soon, and we're going to put all these documents, we're going to scan them and put them up on our social media, so you can go ahead and take a look at them while you're listening to the podcast. And we hope you enjoyed this episode. Bern?
I certainly did, and sincere thanks to Teddie Moreno for coming and showing up and bringing such goodies with her.
Yeah,
that
these were fun.
There's a lot of fun and a lot of information, and it makes me kind of sad for him that he wasn't more well known after all he did. But there is a quiet strength to him that can go unnoticed by some, but noticed by many.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Thank
Yeah.
you. He lived through a lot, and he saw a lot of changes. Being a pioneer here, he saw a lot of changes. So, and he was part of it all. So, thank you for saying that comment.
Yeah, beautiful.
And so he died in 1905?
1905,
He became a state in what, 1912?
1912.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So interesting. Cool. Alrighty. Well, that's it for today. Be sure to check us out on all of our socials. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcast. Thank you. Shout out to Bern, who's one of our producers. Shout out to Cynthia, who's our communications coordinator. And of course, shout out to Jacob, who makes the podcast happen. And we will catch you next time.